Good morning. Good morning. It's Monday, the 3rd of January. This is Jamaica Live. I'm Bruce Golding. I want to hope that all my listeners had a peaceful Christmas, festive Christmas, in spite of COVID, and that all of us are geared, re-energized, reinvigorated to face the challenges of the new year. The thing with the new year, is that it brings challenges, some of them carrying over from last year, but it also provides opportunities for us to do better, opportunities for us to conquer some of the difficulties that we experienced last year, opportunities for us to make a better way for ourselves and, importantly, for others. So my best wishes to all of you for a productive, successful, beneficial 2022. There are thousands of persons in Jamaica who suffer from various ailments. The one I want to focus on today is kidney disease. Kidney disease affects, I saw a recent statement from the Minister of Health that says there are 150,000 people in Jamaica suffering from kidney disease at various stages, some of them very severe, some of them what one may call manageable. And in some of those cases, the disease progresses to the extent that the kidneys cannot function anymore. It cannot do the work that kidneys are supposed to do, which is to remove fluid from the body, convert that fluid into urine, remove waste, remove toxins, and so on. So many persons who are at an advanced stage of kidney failure have to live on dialysis. And in order to stay alive, they have to be dialyzed, I believe, twice per week. And each session involves sitting on that machine for, I'm not sure, an hour, 2 hours, while the machine extracts the blood, purifies it, and then puts that blood back in the body. Now, it is, apart from being a very stressful process, it's very expensive. Now, dialysis treatment is offered at public hospitals, government hospitals, free of cost, thanks to a decision that a certain prime minister made more than 10 years ago. But at the university hospital, where it is subsidized, government pays part of the cost. It costs $7,500 per session. So if you have to do that twice a week, that's $15,000 a week. That is $750,000 a year, $780,000 a year. How many people can afford that? How poor people? I mean, how would they manage that? They can't find $15,000 a week to pay for dialysis. They can't find $15,000 a week to buy food and pay rent and pay light bill. And if they and part of the problem with the public facilities, of course, is that the government doesn't have enough machines to be able to dialyze all the people that need to be dialyzed. There are currently, I believe, throughout the island, some 3,000 patients on dialysis. There are close to 2,000 patients who are waiting to go on dialysis, but they can't get on the machine because we don't have enough machines. And if you choose to go to a private facility, because there are private facilities that offer dialysis treatment, that costs you anywhere between $10,000 and $20,000 per session. Now that's between $1.5 and $2 million a year. Very few people can afford that. So every year we have people who die from kidney disease. Kidney disease normally, in most cases, results from diabetes. And diabetes is the biggest cause of death in Jamaica. I think some 2,500 or 2,600 the last time I looked at the number. Some 2,600 people a year die from diabetes. And many of those end up with kidney failure, where they can't afford to be dialyzed, or their situation has become so badly that dialysis can't save them. It's something that I want us to focus on, because it doesn't have to be that way. We are born with 2 kidneys. And when those kidneys get infected, when they become diseased, we're in serious trouble. But the irony of the situation is that every week we're burying people. We're putting bodies in caskets, or we're cremating them to ashes, that have good, healthy, live kidneys. And kidney transplant is not a new science. Matter of fact, we did our first kidney transplant here in Jamaica in 1971 by one of our celebrated surgeon, Dr. Lawson Douglas. Did the first kidney transplant, successful kidney transplant in 1971. We have done more since then, but not as many as we ought to. And, organ transplants have become a kind of routine part of medical practice. We're talking about kidneys, but it's not kidneys alone. There are other organs that can be transplanted. We have had heart transplant. Remember Dr. Christian Barnard, I think his name was, from South Africa, who did the first heart transplant. Some of you may recall Mr. Eli Matalon, who was a former Minister of Education, and then he was Minister of National Security back in the 70s. Eli Matalon had a heart transplant. His heart was failing him, and he got the heart from a young 20-odd-year-old young man. I remember once talking to him, and he said, "Listen, I'm as fit as a fiddle because I have a 20-odd-year-old heart, even though I'm over 70. So there are various organs that can be transplanted. Heart, lungs, pancreas, liver. We're transplanting things like bone marrow, skin grafts, cornea, for people who have serious eye disease. So it has become a fairly routine procedure. In America, for example, in the United States, last year there were 39,000 transplant procedures done. Worldwide, it was something like 140,000. Don't hold me to the exact figure, but somewhere in that region. part of the difficulty with looking at transplant as a life-saving opportunity or life-saving chance, potential for people who have diseased organs. Part of the problem, of course, is getting those live organs. Now, I know of many cases where people who suffer from kidney failure, they have got a relative who is willing to donate one of their kidneys. You know, we're born with 2 kidneys, we're born with 2 lungs, we're born with 2 of many things. And when you're born with 2 kidneys, one is basically a spare, you know, because 1 kidney alone can do all the functions that a kidney needs to do. So people can donate a kidney, keep one, and the one they keep can do the work that needs to be done. So I know of many cases where persons whose kidneys are shot, gone, conk out. They have got relatives, a son, a daughter, a sister, whatever, who is willing to donate one of their kidneys to save a life, because it's effectively what they're doing. But many people are not prepared to do that. You know, many people who are not prepared to give up one of their kidneys or one of their lungs or a piece of their liver, because when the liver is something that grows, you know, so if you have a liver that has gone to the stage where it can't work anymore, you don't need a whole liver from somebody else. If you get a piece of somebody else's liver, they can put that in your body and that liver will grow and take over the job. But there are many people who won't do that even for their relative. What? Me? Give up my kidney? They want to me if the other one get bad. Worst of all, if you're talking about giving up a kidney now for a stranger who you don't know. People don't do that. And quite frankly, it's kind of unreasonable to ask them to do that. You know, you're living a good life, you eat well, you maintain, you know, you exercise, why should you give up a kidney for somebody who drink too much liquor or eat too much fatty food and who develop kidney problems? But there's another way. As I said before, we're burying people every week. We put them in a casket and we put them 6 foot under the ground. Or we burn them, turn them to ashes. And what we're putting in that casket, what we're burning, contains organs, kidneys, hearts, lungs, pancreas, that are alive, that are healthy, and that could enable somebody else who is looking at only a few months left to live, could transform that horizon into many years to live. But we don't have a system, we don't have a program, and in fact we don't have a culture that allows that to happen. Now, I don't want to oversimplify the issue, because organ donation is not a simple procedure. If you're looking at, for example, people who die in motor vehicle accidents, people who die even from gunshot wounds, or people who die from some ailment that doesn't affect some of their vital organs, the window of opportunity to transfer those organs from that person when they die to a person who needs that organ in order to live, that window of opportunity is very narrow. Very, very narrow. You know, like, I mean, a heart, I believe, can live outside of the body no more than 5 or 6 hours. A kidney can do a little longer. I believe a kidney can do up to 24, maybe 36 hours. So the process of removing that organ from the dead person, transporting it to a place where it can be inserted in a live person who needs it. Bear in mind that you have to make sure that it matches, you have to check the blood type and so on. It's a logistical nightmare, Somebody dies in a motor vehicle accident. You have no more than 3 or 4 hours to take out that organ, to transport it to an operating theater somewhere. The recipient is going to have to be available at a moment's notice to be wheeled into that operating theater. It's a tight window. I remember once I was at the Jackson Memorial Hospital. I went there because I had an accident to my eye and I needed surgery. But while I was there, I saw a whole group of people, looked like there were nurses and other hospital staff, running down the corridor with a cooler. Ordinary cooler, the kind of cooler we take to the beach and put beers and soda in. And I didn't know what it all meant, so I asked some, I said, what is that all about? They said, well, that is an organ that is being rushed to the operating theater because there's a patient waiting there to receive it. So it's a logistical challenge. But it can be done, as I said before. America did 39,000 last year. Worldwide, they did 140,000. It can be done. Lawson Douglas showed the way back in 1971. We have had transplant surgeries since then. Not many. Sometimes they've been done by visiting medical missions. We have some Jamaican doctors here who have done them. We're not short of capability. We have the doctors who are capable of doing that transplant. They are capable of removing the organ from the dead person. They are capable of implanting that organ in the live person. But there are challenges that we have to face. I mean, we have to make sure that we have the equipment to enable that patient after the transplant to cope, because they have to fight rejection. There's a period during which they are in delicate condition and so on. All of that. But all of that is doable. I mean, that equipment is available. We can get it. Our biggest problem is that we don't have a source of organs. So somebody dies in a motor vehicle accident, or somebody is injured in a motor vehicle accident. They are rushed to hospital. They spend 2-3 days in that hospital. I mean, when they die on the spot, it's kind of impossible to retrieve that organ, because by the time the police done process the crime scene or the accident scene, and the ambulance come and move that person to hospital, that organ is of no use anymore. But suppose they're injured in a car accident and you go to hospital and you're in hospital and they operate on you and they're working on you, but after 2-3 days you couldn't make it. Those are live organs. Those organs can be used to save the lives of other people. You may have people who have gunshot wounds and they're in hospital and they're battling for life and they lose that battle. Live organs are there. But we don't have a program, and importantly, we don't have a culture that allows us to extract those organs to save the lives of others. There are social hurdles that have to be overcome. There are religious hurdles. I mean, there are some religious, what do I call them? People who hold to certain religious tenets, who believe that transplanting organs is an affront to God, because God made man. And when you start talking about putting in a new kidney or putting in a new lung or putting in a new heart, you're interfering with God's work. What you're saying is that God, you never did the job good, so we have to fix it. Who are we to be fixing what God does? So there's that. And then there is the other tenet that holds that the body and soul are inseparable. And therefore, when somebody dies, if you remove an organ, you are desecrating that soul, because that organ is part of the soul, and therefore you're not to touch it. What we must do is bury it. The problem is that when you bury it now, the worms, them don't have them kind of cultural fixation. Them dive into it, and in a couple of weeks, no organ are left because the worms go on with it. These are some of the things that we want to look at. I have to take a break, but when I come back, we have some interesting guests, people who have far greater knowledge and expertise in these matters than I only raise questions, but I depend on experts to tell me how we can address these issues. So when we come back, we're discussing organ transplanting. We're discussing a situation where so many people are dying every year because of organ failure, organ disease, maybe heart, maybe lungs, maybe kidneys. And that life could be spared. I mean, life could be prolonged. We can't spare life forever, but it could be prolonged. People could be given a new life. If, as a matter of fact, I saw in the Gleaner this morning a story about a gentleman who is pleading for an organ donor. But where's that organ donor going to come from? If he doesn't have a relative whose blood type and classification, etc., matches, then he has to depend on a stranger. Where are you going to find a stranger to give up one of their kidneys for this gentleman who they don't know? I don't say, maybe 1 in a million, maybe 1 in 100 million people would do that. But as I pointed out before, we are interring in the ground live, healthy, well, not live anymore, but once live, healthy kidneys, heart, lungs, pancreases, if that's the proper term, organs that could save other people's life. But we don't have a program, we don't have a culture, we don't have a legislative framework that enables us to transfer those live organs from somebody who has died, but who in that short space of time after death, while those organs are still alive, in that short space of time, those organs could give life, could be the gift of life for others. I'm very pleased to welcome to the program someone who is an expert on these matters, someone who has done tremendous work. I'm talking about Professor Everard Barton, Professor of Medicine and Nephrology. Nephrology, I believe he can correct me if I'm wrong. Nephrology involves study of kidney functions and kidney operation, kidney disease, the whole kidney business. But I'm very pleased to welcome him to the program because he's going to help us with this subject. Professor Barton, do I have you online?
Yes, indeed, and thank you for having me on the program. And your definition of nephrology is quite correct, the study of the art and craft of the kidney and the conditions related to the kidney.
can you help me to size up the problem? How big? I know that your specialty is kidney, but then I want to broaden it because there are other organs that are transplantable. How big is this issue of persons who, but for an organ to replace the defective, the diseased one that they have, but for that organ, they're going to die sooner than they have to die?
Yes. And indeed, as you said in your preliminary discussions, the good Lord has given us some organs in duplicate, or given us some organs with segments that can be removed without endangering the life and the quality of life or the longevity of an individual. And so organs like the kidneys, the lungs, the liver, sections of the liver. Of course, we cannot take a whole liver from somebody. These are organs which can be removed and transplanted into someone else to enable them to live a fairly normal life, normal quality of life. If we get, for instance, and it's a big problem. For instance, it is said that 21 persons die every day in the United States on a waiting list for a kidney. It is also said that you need the number of patients with kidney disease and who require kidney transplant is sometimes 5 times or 6 times more than you would have donors for these individuals. So it's a major problem, and what we need to do is continue our education program of the population, of the society, to see how we can at least mitigate some of these problems.
Go ahead.
No, I was saying I'm not sure if I answered your question, but you can ask me.
No, you did, but I wanted to take you a little further. I wanted you to sort of outline to us what are the big challenges. We have some social, cultural issues. I want to hold those back for the time being. But bear in mind, as I understand, you can guide me because I don't have your credentials. But as I understand it, when a person is declared brain dead,
yes,
there is a short window of opportunity within which organs can be removed in a state that is usable. You medical people call it harvesting. There's a short window of opportunity within which you have to remove that organ. It has to be done carefully. It has to be properly stored for the short period of time. Rush to the recipient. The recipient has to be available at a moment's notice. The surgical procedure has to be ready to go to get started. How do you manage that? I mean, if somebody, for example, let us say somebody dies in the Savlamar Hospital, but Savlamar doesn't have the facility there to do transplanting. That facility may be at the university hospital where you are. Is it possible to move that organ from Savlamar to Kingston to have that recipient ready to have that surgical procedure carried out within that short window of opportunity?
Okay, yes, it can be done. Organs can be harvested elsewhere and moved to a transplant center. But of course, as you rightly said, the organ has to be removed very carefully, and it has to be stored properly in its transfer. But let me go. What really one needs in a country or in a region like the Caribbean where we are having kidney transplant is we need to have a proper organ transplant unit. I know that they have set up one at the university hospital recently, and on that board sit people from persons from various hospitals in the country that have to deal with kidney disease and dialysis. But it is more than that. There has to be a center where there are all the facilities for managing a stored organ, for receiving the stored organ, the computers for matching the donor, whether it be a deceased donor or a live donor, with the prospective recipient, the person who is going to have kidneys. And this center has to network with the hospital and the nephrologist in the various areas in the country or in the region.
And that has to be 24/7.
That has to be 24/7 because at midnight, there may be a road traffic accident. The person is declared brain dead, and I will come back a little while to let our listeners hear about brain death, how it is done, and the particulars of that individual, and the family is given consent for removal of the organs, whether it be heart, liver, cornea, kidneys, intestine. And in that period, the center, the hospital, the doctors, they have to send the particulars of that person with the blood to do all the matching, and the computers do the matching and pick up the right match because they already had the particulars of all the people who require a kidney. So, and when that is done, the person is called in promptly so that they can have the transplant. Now, there are other things which have to be done in a center like that. We can't take a kidney and we don't know the HIV status or the hepatitis B status or the hepatitis C status of such a patient. So all those things have to be done in that short period of time. Is
that doable, Professor Barton? In that short period of time?
It is doable.
In a country like Jamaica?
Well, sir, let me tell you, in the 1990s when we did it, we are informed that there's a brain dead person in ICU. Of course, we, the nephrologists, cannot get involved at all in the management of that patient. We cannot ask the relatives for a kidney.
You have a conflict of interest.
We have a conflict of interest. So once we are told what we did, we get into ICU, the consent has been signed by the relatives, we get the blood, we run with it in our pocket to the lab where the HLA and the other matching are done. We had somebody working on it non-stop. Sometimes we buy food and give it to them so they don't move from the desk. We get the results, we get back, and sometimes it's about midnight where we are moving in to do the transplant. In fact, in those days, the transplant was done down at KPH. The physicians from KPH joined the surgeons at KPH, and usually it's done at midnight when the theaters tend to be rather freer. And we would be driving down to KPH at midnight and doing the transplant. The body, the deceased person has to remain on a ventilator where blood and oxygen is being pushed through the organ, right? We can't take them off. So there has to be sufficient facilities for that to take place. If the individual is in an outlying hospital, you say Savlama, again, we would need to continue pushing fluid, pushing oxygen until the organ is harvested. An organ without fluid going through it, without oxygen going through it, is no good for transplant. It means a lot of work, but it can be done. And when it's all over and done and you see the good results, you feel very good about it.
Well, it's interesting. And it means that the donor, the recipient, would have to be within
Yes.
a few minutes away from the transplant center, no?
Yes. So with the ideal situation, I talked about with the computers doing the matching because they already have the HLA of all the people on dialysis. The matching things that are needed for matching on the computer already. But in our case, if somebody is considered brain dead and the person is, say, O positive or A positive, we would look for a compatible blood group, call about 6 persons in, and we call them in from different hospitals. If the person is brain dead at University Hospital, they have 2 kidneys. What we did in the past, we kept one for a patient at University Hospital, and we share one with somebody from another hospital. Usually it was KPH, because KPH was the only place with a dialysis unit and had its patients listed that needed transplant. But we have quite a lot of other hospitals now. Spanish Town has come on board, Mandeville has come on board, Cornwall has come on board. So we would call these people in and do the matching of, say, 6 of them, and then we pick up the one that matches best.
We're talking here about kidneys. Would the same circumstances, same issues arise if we were talking about lungs or hearts or pancreas?
Yes, we need always to exclude other diseases in the prospective donor.
Yes.
And we still need to do the matching properly for these individuals.
What do we need to do to make all of this possible? Is there a legislative framework that needs to be put in place? Is there a cultural shift that needs to be initiated?
Yeah, let's talk about the cultural shift first. Persons have put a great deal of emphasis on this, in that people don't want to give kidneys and so on and so on. Let me tell you, the first kidney transplant was done in Jamaica by Professor Lawson Douglas and his team in 1971. And between 1971 and somewhere about 1993 or 94, all the patients who were transplanted except one, and I will tell you about that one, were deceased donors, right? People were quite willing, after having been educated, to donate the organs of their relatives rather than bury these in the earth. And the persons who have done it before were used as ambassadors. Families in which this was done were used as ambassadors to come forward to say, look, and I remember this lady distinctly saying, I had only one son, and my son died in a road traffic accident. And I was convinced to give his kidneys so that 2 people could live. And she said she was reluctant at the time, but 5 years down the road, it is the greatest comfort to her that her son now lives in 2 other people. And I think with education of the public, education of society, we can get back to that point where people were coming forward to give their kidneys. The kidneys of the deceased relatives. Now, something changed somewhere about the late 1990s, in that donation of organs need to be voluntary. People then began to ask for money. They began to ask for wiping off the hospital bills and so on. And that cannot be done. It's not going to be considered voluntary, and we can run into great trouble internationally.
Why? Why? I want to explore that with you.
It is said that kidney donation, organ donation should be a voluntary thing, which does not involve coercion, does not involve anything that could be interpreted as buying and selling of organs.
Well, I can understand a situation where you say no, because people who are in penury. I don't want a situation where somebody comes and offers them $100,000 if they will give a kidney.
Yeah.
But what would be wrong if you had a system that said, for example, if your relative dies, and you are willing to give permission for the organs to be harvested and used, there is a monetary compensation. I mean, somebody, for example, who is told that they have a relative who has died. They're facing horrendous funeral expenses that they can't manage. What would be wrong in saying in a situation like that, if you agree for the organs to be harvested, here is a compensation to assist you with the expenses that you have to face anyhow with that death?
Yes. And you're quite right. That is part of the debate which is going on now in the National Society of Nephrology, and I do sit on one of the boards in North American and Caribbean boards. And a lot of that discussion is going on at the moment.
Let me put another scenario to you, Professor Barton.
Yeah.
Suppose you were to offer me life insurance coverage. Mm-hmm. Suppose you were to say, all right, your life, you can sign up for a $500,000 life insurance policy that you don't have to pay for it. It's already paid for on the basis that if you die, your organs are harvestable. What's wrong with that?
On the surface, it doesn't appear as if anything is wrong. But where the societies are having the problem is that something like this could be terribly abused. And I don't want to mention certain countries' names across the Atlantic where there has been terrible abuse.
I know of some of them.
Situations like this. And not only a promise is made that you can have life insurance, but after the situation is done, that doesn't materialize. Payment stops for a year, or after a year, or after 6 months. And I think these are the thorny issues that we're debating at the moment. I myself do feel that we can get around this some way. I do feel, for instance, I recall in the 2000, there was a grandmother who lost a son. The son had 3 young children, 5, 3 years, 9 years. They were going to school. She couldn't manage them at school. And it hurts one's heart to know that this lady needed help, couldn't get help, was quite willing to give the kidney, and she did donate the organ. I think that what happened ultimately down the road is that social workers got involved with her, got her through the social service system, and got some companies in the society to help sponsor the children to school. Now, certainly something like that could be done, but one has to be very careful. This thing can be terribly abused. And the way I see the discussion going now, they're going to find a middle road somewhere for this, because patients, relatives, prospective donors are kicking fuss in other countries around the world that if a hospital bill is wiped out, they don't see why this is considered buying an organ. And I think we are going to get there. But we just have to be a little more patient. Unfortunately, people are dying.
Mm-hmm. The difficulty I have is that that consideration has to be put on the same page with the enormous amount of money that patients are spending for dialysis, for staying alive. I'm kind of encouraged to hear that you say the discussions are taking place, and hopefully we can see a shift in the thinking that has prevailed up to now.
Yes, and you touch on a very important point there, which I would really like listeners to understand, is that it is far cheaper, ultimately, whether it be for the family or the government, to have a patient transplanted than to have that patient sitting on dialysis day in, day out.
Many of them can't afford it. And those that can't afford it can't get on the government machines.
Yes, because they're all filled up.
Yeah.
And the private sector, the cost of dialysis is tremendous. And it keeps going up because we buy a lot of these things through in US dollars. We bring them into the country. The dollar been changing value.
And it's not just the machines, it's the supplies that you need to complete the process, no?
It is not just the machine which are one-off buy. It's the reusable thing.
Yes.
The line, the equipment that works as a kidney, the chemicals, the acid and the bicarb, the syringes, the needles, the heparin, all of those things. It's the reusable thing that increase the cost tremendously for this process. But the cost of kidney transplantation crosses over. In the first year, it may be more expensive than keeping the patient on dialysis, but after the first year, it crosses over and becomes cheaper to have transplanted that patient.
Yes.
And in some countries where they are now using just the generic drugs, it becomes cheaper even earlier.
Before we go, and we have to go, I'm running out of time, but before we go, what is the percentage of rejection you find? I know your focus is on kidney transplant. What's the percentage of rejection?
Okay.
Body rejection. Yeah.
We have had a pretty good program here. In fact, from those first cases done in the 1970s, when we didn't have these fancy drugs to prevent rejection, people were lived up to 30 years, 35 years. Our rejection rate, if I looked at the cases which have been done over the last 4 to 5 years, I don't think we have anybody who has fully rejected. People may have a mild rejection, and you bring in some drugs and treat them, they get over it, but there is nobody
that's good.
Who has lost their kidneys in the last 4 or 5 years.
That's good to hear.
Unfortunately, we had somebody who died because of COVID, but the kidney was functioning quite all right.
That's good to hear. Professor Barton, thank you very, very much. You've been very helpful to the discussion, and we're going to continue it for the rest of the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah. We're talking organ transplant. Professor Barton is a kidney specialist. So that's why that discussion spent a lot of time on kidneys. But the same issues arise, whether it is heart, lung, pancreas, intestines, you name it. There's somebody I want to bring onto the program now, somebody who I recall a couple of years ago. I ran into him at the 23rd Swing, and he spoke with me about this very issue, the business of organ transplant. He's Dr. Kenneth Vaughn, consultant orthopedic surgeon and lecturer at the University Hospital. And I'm so pleased to have him join us on the program to help us with the discussion. Dr. Vaughn, are you there?
I'm here, Mr. Goulding. Thank you very much for having me.
So, I'm so pleased that you were able to join us. I don't know if you heard the discussion I had with Professor Barton, but
I heard the latter part of the discussion.
I want you to help us with this issue. There are certain medical challenges that we face, no? Because as I said in the discussion with him, the window of opportunity between harvesting a viable organ and transplanting it is very narrow, and that involves some mind-boggling logistical challenges, but they're not insurmountable. But we also have some social, cultural obstacles that are perhaps even more challenging than the medical ones. How do we get to the point where we are prepared to look at organ donation as a gift of life rather than as a desecration of life?
I think we will have to have a program of promoting the awareness of the Jamaican population on the real value of organ transplantation and the effect that it has on our population. And I think that will require coordination with all members of the medical fraternity who are involved in organ transplantation, so that we can notify the public of the need for organ donation. So people can actually make decisions before they undergo any illness or trauma, to say that if anything happens to me, I will be more than happy to donate my organ for the well-being of the Jamaican population.
Do we need a legislative framework to support it?
Yes, we do, because at the moment, our Human Tissue Act, which is from the 1970s, speaks primarily of donation from cadavers. That's a dead individual. However, most of the donations that are being done now are being done with
from live donors.
Live donors. And so there should be a change in that act.
But isn't the cadaver a much bigger source? I mean, we're burying a lot of people every week with some viable organs, no?
Yes, it is. And even for my discipline, you can take someone's entire, for example, their entire bone in the thigh or the leg to be used for others in a cadaver. But as you mentioned earlier, the timing of that is also very important. And
let me ask you this, Dr. Vaughn, I want to provoke your mind. What the devil is wrong with saying to somebody that, look, sign this piece of paper here that says that if you die, your organs can be taken and used for transplanting. And in return for signing this piece of paper, there is a $500,000, $1 million, whatever it is, that will be paid to your dependents. What's wrong with that?
Okay. Now, I'm not aware of that being a part of the protocol for signing, because we have to ensure that whoever is willing will do so irrespective of the costing that is involved.
But why would they want to do that, Dr. Vaughn? You see, we're depending entirely on altruism.
Yes.
Regrettably, altruism is a very shallow virtue. So what's wrong with providing some incentives? I would never condone or support this business where somebody enters into a contract to say, well, all right, I will sell you my kidney. Since I have two, I'll sell you one. I'm not into that. But what is wrong in saying to somebody, if you get into a car accident and you are rushed to hospital and after 2-3 days after surgery you die, your organs can be harvested, and there is this compensation that your family will be able to access because they're going to be strapped now to go find the money to go bury you. Let me just take the break, and when we come back, we'll pick up on that discussion. I'd love to have your answer to that. Welcome back. It's Jamaica Live. We're on Bridge 99. I'm going to be joining New York shortly. But we've been talking about organ donation, organ transplanting. We have online with us Dr. Kenneth Vaughn, consultant orthopedic surgeon. And I raised with him just before we took the break. I'm trying to find out what is the ethical violation in providing some incentive for people to commit themselves or commit their organs after death. Because right now what we do, we try to get people to sign something, or we get their relatives, get people to say, well, if I die, and there are some countries where people wear bracelets to confirm, to verify that, where people agree that if I die, you can take my organs to save somebody else's life. As I said, I'm not into this business where you create a market for human organs. I'm not into that. Because, people, I don't want a situation where somebody can't find the money to pay them children university fees, so they're willing to go sell part of the body to get the money to do that. No, I'm not into that. But what is wrong with saying to somebody, look, if you die, motor vehicle accident, gunshot wound, some illness that doesn't damage your critical organs, if you die and you are willing, before you die, by signing this agreement, you are willing to have your organs removed to save the lives of other people, then in consideration of that, rather than just depending on your good-heartedness, your altruism, in consideration of that, this compensation, this money will be made available to your dependents. And you name the dependents. You say, well, that money must be paid to my wife, my girlfriend, my son, my daughter, whatever. They probably going to need it to bury you in the first place. But they probably need it to also help pay the school fees for this. I'm just trying to find out what ethical violation does that involve. Dr. Vaughn, help me with that. Do we have Dr. Vaughn on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, help me with that. I mean, that's the equation that I'm putting to you. What's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with it in terms of having individuals decide that they would make a donation. However, one of the things that we have to consider whenever you donate organs, there has to be screening of individuals to ensure that they are not carrying any infectious disease which can be transmitted through the donation of the organ.
Like hepatitis.
Pardon?
Like hepatitis.
Like hepatitis or HIV infection, syphilis, all of these things, which are infectious diseases. And so if you make that decision, the individual may feel that, and tell their children or their relatives that you'll be able to get X amount of funding, but you may find that with screening the individual, they cannot actually be a donor. So I think that has to be made public in terms of the screening process which is required for individuals, so that individuals will not say, well, you will get this, because there are restrictions that have to be.
That is a risk that I'd be prepared to take. So you win some, you lose some. So this patient who had signed up, we discovered that he has hepatitis B, so his organs can't be used. Well, too bad.
Yeah.
But there's another one where we can get 2 kidneys, so that's 2 lives that we can save, right? That's all.
Yes. Yes. But all of this has to be made, known publicly.
Yes. Is the social cultural resistance insurmountable? I mean, can we get to the stage where, I mean, you take a family that has never had anybody there with organ failure. I mean, their family members, them live and them reach old age and they die, or they die in some accident. Are we going to be able to convince sufficient of them that the organs in their body is something that is donatable?
Yes, I think it can be done. And I think the more we make the process publicly, then I think it will enhance the acceptance of the population of the donation.
Are we equipped? Are we equipped to handle it? Let us say that we were able to get that kind of revolution going. Let us say we're able to convince people that, hey, this is the way to go. Are we? Do we have the capability to handle it? I'm not talking now about the competence of our surgeons, because I know that we have that. But in terms of the logistical management, the harvesting, with the kind of care that has to be done. So somebody meeting a car accident in Linstead, for example. Do we have the people who are capable of harvesting those organs with the care that is required, storing it, moving it to a transplant center? While that is being done, lining up the recipient to come, so you need to get here within the next 25 minutes. All of that. In addition, do we have the capability to do the post-operative care to fight the chances of rejection and to deliver that patient with a renewed life? How much of a challenge is that for us?
Well, it is a challenge, especially at this time that we're going through a pandemic. But once this is over, I think we can focus more clearly on that aspect of organ donation. But I think it requires a certain level of competence in terms of the establishment of the facilities for donating organs and for the storage of organs. This can be done, and it has been done in a number of countries. And I don't think that we in Jamaica are deficient.
Do you know?
We have made that decision that we're going to embark on this. I think it can be established.
Do you know? I'm wrapping up now because I'm getting the wrap-up signal. But do you know what percentage of the I know we haven't done a great many, but what percentage of the transplants we have done, what percentage of those have come from live donors as distinct from cadavers?
The majority in recent times have been from live donors.
Mm.
Initially, when we had the start of kidney transplant in the 1970s, it was from cadaveric donors, but now it's from live donors.
Yes. Which poses other challenges that we would have to face, no?
Yes.
Because to persuade, I mean, it's one thing to ask me to give up one of my kidneys for my brother or my daughter or my father. It's another thing if you ask me to do that for somebody I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a tall order,
That's a tall order. And, there are individuals who are willing to do it regardless.
Yes. Well, thank God for them.
Yes.
Thank
They're
God
in a very small percentage of the population worldwide. When it comes to live donors, you'll find that most of the donations actually come from members of one family.
Yeah, immediate relatives. I know. I
Immediate
have a situation like that in my own extended family.
Yes.
Yes. Dr.
And
Vaughn, thank you very, very much. Thank you very much. You've been very helpful to the discussion. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Good.
I think we're live with New York now. Irish, Beauregard, you're about?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. Happy New Year.
Oh, go on, my friend.
I'm here, Mr. Golden. Just enjoying the vibes and the New Year. You know?
Yeah. How is New York?
Well, New York is very cold today. We're about at 29 degrees, and it's not going to get any warmer than that today.
One day you're up and one day you're down. Yeah?
Yes, it was actually a little bit warm last week, but now it's they promised some snow early this morning.
My nephew was here for Christmas from Washington, from DC, and he said Christmas Day it was 70 degrees.
Yes, it was actually very warm last week going into the Christmas weekend and the New Year's weekend.
Boy,
Yes.
you up and down. We don't do those things here,
I know it's lovely weather all year round in Jamaica,
up,
which
my
is
dear
why we
man.
miss it. We miss it. We miss it on this side.
So I don't jump on a plane and come down here.
I wish I could, but a lot of flights are being cancelled right now. A lot of people can't reach home from the holidays. Thousands of flights were cancelled due to the COVID-19 and even a winter storm that took place on the East Coast
Put on
as
some
well.
Put on some skinny wear and swim. Come to Jamaica. What's wrong with you?
One
Well,
of these days I'll try something like that.
Hail up all the Jamaicans up in New York for me, and I hope that they had a restful, inspiring, peaceful Christmas, and I hope that they are ready to face all the challenges for the new year, no?
Yes, everybody's gearing up for it. Also have to say big up to the mayor who was sworn in on January 1st.
Yes.
Yeah, so he has a tall order in getting the city around this pandemic and the COVID-19.
He's coming in at a very challenging time.
Yes, true indeed. Yeah,
But he knows the ropes because he has been there, no?
yes, he has. He was the Brooklyn Borough president. He was also a police officer. So he's been in New York and he actually knows the ropes.
Yeah, we're going to be watching him.
True.
Thank you, Beauregard. All the best to you for the new year.
Same to you, sir.
All right, we want to bring on now. We've been talking about organ transplant, organ donation, all of the issues that are involved. Some of them are medical issues, as I pointed out, because, one of the things about human organs, it's not something that you can. I mean, even if you take somebody who dies in a car crash or dies from gunshot wounds, you can't take out the kidney and the heart and the liver, the lungs, and throw it into a freezer. Like when you buy a chicken at the supermarket, you throw it in the freezer until you're ready to use it. It's not so it works. Human organs have a limited shelf life. So there are serious medical, logistical, administrative, technical issues. You have to make sure that you cross-match to make sure that the lung or the kidney that's coming from John Brown can match with Susan, who is 5 minutes away from the hospital and ready to receive it. But there are also ethical issues involved. We spoke today about some of the cultural issues, but there are ethical issues involved as well. And those ethical issues have to do with, should there be limits? Should there be lines that medical science is not allowed to cross? And somebody who can help us with that particular area of focus, plus others, is my next guest, Dr. Derrick, who is a consultant bioethicist, which deals with not only the scientific side of medicine, but also the ethical issues involved. He's the convener and president of the Bioethics Society of the English-speaking Caribbean, and he's a member of the International Advisory Board for Bioethics of PAHO, the Pan American Health Organization. Dr. Aarons, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mr. Golden, and hello, good afternoon to all your audience.
Where you been? You're not here anymore. Where are you?
I'm currently working in the Turks and Caicos Islands.
Oh, that's where you are.
Yes,
That's
yes.
good. Yeah, not that far away.
Right. Yes.
Tell me something. We're talking today about organ donation, organ transplant. As I said before I introduced you, there are technical medical issues involved. But what are the ethical considerations that we cannot afford to ignore?
Well, for your audience, ethics comes into literally everything that we do with another human being. Because, simply put, ethics says, or it begs the question, how should I conduct myself in the presence of others? So once humans are interacting, ethical issues always have to underpin those considerations. So when you think about the human body, parts of the human body, and donating parts of the human body to another human being for their benefit, then we have to look at the ethical underpinnings of it.
What are those?
As you just mentioned, there are biomedical issues, compatibility of the organs themselves. But how you procure those organs, was there informed consent from the person in the case of a live donor? Because you can have dead donors, persons who provide what is called a living will or an advance directive that says, if and when I die, I want my organs or this particular organ to go this place or so on. So those are the considerations, whether informed consent was there, prior approval, or whether, as occurs in some jurisdictions, the country says we are short of these organs. All persons who die in a motor vehicle accident or whatever, such and such an organ should be used because there's a great shortage of kidneys or the cornea for blindness or for heart, etc., etc. And so those are some of the ethical issues, just touching on them lightly, that we have to see. One, the recipient is there, the person who is receiving it. Is it being done legally? In other words, we know that in some countries like India, you can have commercialization, commodification of organs where they're actually sold to the highest bidder. And invariably, it's the poor that are exploited to the benefit of the rich. So that is another big ethical issue.
I want you to pause there, Derrick, because that's where I want to focus. Because I don't know how much we will go some distance, but I don't know how far we will go if we're depending on live donors. Because I don't know that there are many live donors who are willing to give up one of their organs for somebody who they don't know. They will do it for a close relative. Many of them won't even do it for a close relative, but to the extent that they do, what I want to put to you is this. In the discussions that I have read about, dealing with ethical considerations, which is part of your expertise, the word altruism keeps coming up. Now, I don't know how much reliance we can put on altruism. I mean, Jesus would have to come off his cross and say to people, go give up your kidney. Or even to say, well, I signed this piece of paper to say that if you die, they can take your kidney and heart and so on. What is wrong? I keep asking this question. What is wrong with offering compensation? Now, I take your point. We don't want to get to the stage that we have got in places like India, you mentioned, and indeed some parts of Latin America, where you can actually go purchase a kidney. You say to a man, look, I'll give you $50,000. Now, that man had never seen $50,000 in one bundle. And he said, yeah, man. As a matter of fact, if I could give you two and you give me 100,000, I would do it. But what is wrong in saying, now, look, if you die and your organs are usable, your dependents would be entitled to receive X sum, which they probably need because maybe you were the breadwinner of the family. Maybe they can't find the money to bury you. So we're not buying the organs in terms of saying to somebody, give up an organ and receive a money. But we're saying to them, if you die, rather than that valuable, healthy kidney or heart or cornea, being put in a casket and put 6 foot under to feed the worms. Here is some compensation that your family would be entitled to. What's wrong with that, Derrick? Tell me.
You have to look at it at an individual level. Sure, society, and depending on the jurisdiction, may well legislate such matters. But where there is no regulation of the matter, we have to deal with it at an individual level. Now, you mentioned having spoken earlier of cultural issues. I didn't hear that part of the program. But one of the important considerations, particularly for us in Jamaica, is how people view body integrity, particularly from a religious perspective.
Yes.
So they feel that, and this may be some religious beliefs, taking an organ from a deceased, basically you should bury the person whole, complete, without anything missing.
Desecration.
Right. And so those individuals who have that belief, if you mandate such a requirement, then you could be, in fact, sending them off to God in a defiled state.
No, I'm not mandating, I'm not talking about mandating it. I'm talking about providing an opportunity. Derrick, let me just take a break and I'll come back to you to pick up that discussion. Welcome back. It's Jamaica Live. We're on Bridge 99. It's, what date is it? Monday, 3rd of January, first Monday in the year. We've been talking about human organ harvesting. I want to pin it down to that for transplanting purposes. Because we look at so many people that die each year because they have organ failure. But those are organs that could be replaced. And at the same time, the irony of the situation is that many people are being buried for other causes of death, but being buried with healthy, usable organs. And we're trying to see to what extent can we bring those two scenarios together, where those organs those healthy organs from a person who has died could be made available to prolong the life of someone who is facing death, but who can avoid early death if they could have their organs replaced. And we've been talking with Dr. Derrick Aarons, a consultant bioethicist, a Jamaican, who are now in Turks and Caicos. Dr. Aarons, are you there?
Yes, certainly, Mr. Golick.
How do we move forward on this one? Is there a legislative framework that we would need in order to make sure that we don't get into the kind of situation that you referred to earlier as happens in India?
Undoubtedly. You need a regulatory framework that is quite solid and comprehensive.
Is there any country you know of that has a robust legislative framework that we could perhaps look at to see how adaptable that would be?
I think most of the European countries, the EU, have that in place.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you need to balance, because what you have been speaking about is the obvious benefit. You spoke of altruism, and that's fine when people voluntarily donate. But once the payment of money comes into it, corruption is going to creep in. And that is where ethics seeks to protect the vulnerable.
Yes.
Because it is invariably poor people that will be in demand of the money and are likely to sell their organs to the highest bidder.
Yes.
And so you have that issue, strong ethical issue that you always have to regulate to protect those who are innocent, who may be really desperate.
How do we overcome when we took the break? You had mentioned the cultural, religious, socio-cultural challenges. How do we challenge that? Do we engage the church leaders to say, now, can we have a serious discussion on this?
Paradoxically, it is not the church leaders. Virtually all the religious faiths allow organ donation. It is the individual and how they perceive themselves may feel that to have an organ missing when they are going to their maker is somehow incomplete for them. But religious blessings have been there all across the world: Catholicism, Anglicans, even Hinduism, etc.
But Derrick, I mean,
Uh-huh.
take people. I know many people, for example, who have said, when I die, I want my body to be cremated. I don't want to be go down in no grave to make no worms come mess with me. Why would it be difficult to get that person to say, well, before the cremation, can we take out your liver and your kidney and your heart and so on, so that what we cremate is what is left, what is not transplantable? They wouldn't be averse to that, would they? Or would they?
Maybe, and that's why I say it goes down to the individual level. Research would have to go in each particular society to show what percentage of people are likely to be buried wholesome, and who are others who may be willing volunteers saying, yes, you can take my organs, I wish to benefit the lives of others, etc. We don't know what really exists in Jamaica.
Do you know if we have done any studies at all on it? Any sort of, social studies, social surveys?
I have not seen any research in that area.
Maybe something that I should try and get suggest to Capri or one of those.
Exactly. But remember, all research projects have to have some benefit at the end for people to invest money in doing that research.
Yes.
So what would be the outcome? Is it that we would somehow be moving towards providing organ banking in Jamaica, and therefore we'd want to know what percentage of our population would willing to donate their organs so others could benefit from that bank?
Yes.
We have to look at the end result and see if it is beneficial.
Yes. In terms of the ethical considerations, is that evolving, or is that sort of laid out in some hard, inflexible tenets?
I wouldn't say inflexible, but the tenets have been there since 1967, when I think the first organ transplant took place in India. So individual states have been putting their frameworks in place, certainly over the last 20 years. We in the Caribbean have not yet started thinking that far ahead. But certainly in countries of the North, each of them have been putting in place varying degrees of regulation of it. And so the U.S. may prohibit one of their people will prohibit one of their citizens from flying to India to get a kidney and flying back to the U.S. because invariably it's going to be exploiting a poor member of the Indian society.
Yeah.
But that type of framework can be loosely arranged where people find their ways around this, because we know it still happens. And so each country would have to decide how it's going to structure, what it's going to, the details it's going to put in, how rigorously it's going to be monitored, etc.
Which countries in the Latin American region are pretty well advanced in terms of organ transplanting? Mexico, Brazil?
Those are two, yes. Yes, I think Chile also.
Yes. And in terms of, and you're talking there about live donors or cadaver donors?
Both. Because the regulation would not distinguish between the two. We know that particular organs are more beneficial if it's a live donor, while others like the cornea and so on, it can be dead. You just, cryo preserve the tissue until it is needed. Mm-hmm. But, things like the heart and so on.
How long can a cornea be stored?
That, I think, indefinite. I'll tell you why. If it is properly done by what is called cryopreservation, where there are actually molecular scientists that work using particular chemical agents to actually freeze it, because throwing it in a freezer won't help, because ice particles will form within the cells and the cells will die. So there are specialized scientific ways of doing that. Once you do that, it can really be stored for very long periods of time.
But not so with the kidney.
Correct. Once you have very sensitive tissues that need oxygen literally continuously, or the cells will die. Those have to be transplanted pretty much pretty quickly.
Which brings us to the logistical nightmare that we have to deal with.
Correct.
In terms of synchronizing harvesting and transplanting and all the processes in between. That includes transportation.
Transport, right.
The immediate availability of the recipient, the cross-matching.
Right.
All of that.
Yes, you have to have sophisticated surgical centers in place to be able to do that type of high-quality surgery, transplantation.
Well, Derrick, we need to get there, I mean, Christ, man. I know we have given Lawson Douglas and OJ and all that, but the greatest honor we could ever pay him is to really advance the work that he started 50 years ago.
Yes, quite true.
And to take it much further than where it has reached so far, I'd love if we could get some advance on this before he gets to the stage where he says, goodbye, I'm gone.
Yes, and that particular organ, kidneys, are in great demand because so many Jamaicans are in kidney failure and have to be undergoing dialysis every week, twice a week, etc.
Yeah,
so the demand is there.
And many people either can't afford it or they can't get on the machines at the public hospitals.
Quite true. Insufficient amount of machines available for the demand that's out there.
Yes. And dialysis is something that you have to do twice a week if you really want to live, no?
Yep, correct.
Dr. Derrick Aarons, thank you so much for joining me today.
Glad to be of help. I wish you all the best for 2022.
All the best to you for the new year, too.
Thank you.
Okay, we're talking about organ harvesting, organ donation, organ transplant. We're winding down now. We have another 22 and a half minutes to go. But we have one other guest who's going to help us with this discussion to take it further. I'm not satisfied about tackling the cultural hurdle. And as I've said in the program, and I repeat it, and I'm going to argue with my next guest about it, we're not going to get very far if we're depending on voluntary, altruistic availability of organs for transplant. That will take care of immediate relatives. But I don't know that is going to enable us to respond to the need for organ transplant in the kind of robust way that we ought to. So I'm going to provoke my next guest to help us with this issue. We're talking about Dr. Patrick Bhoorasingh, who is a consultant general surgeon and used to be, I remember that period very well, used to be the senior medical officer at chief medical officer at the Kingston Public Hospital, KPH. Dr. Bhoorasingh.
Good day.
How are you, sir?
Oh, I'm okay, thank you.
Where are you these days?
I trust you are.
Hello?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, where are you these days? I've lost track of you.
Well, I'm in private practice.
I see, okay.
Practice.
Okay.
Yes. And I do some part-time teaching.
You haven't left our shores, thank God.
No, I haven't. Not.
Tell me, organ transplant, organ harvesting. Where are we? Are we making any progress or are we still in the dark ages?
Well, in terms of Jamaica or worldwide?
In terms of Jamaica.
Yeah, well, in Jamaica, we were well on track for kidney transplant. Kidney transplant was sort of in a developing phase, and it was going very well. Anyway, but somewhere along the line, it got derailed.
Was that for lack of donors?
No, not really. I don't think so. Because, to really get the adequate donors, you need some legislation to get organs that unfortunately, there are persons who are called brain dead after some tragic event, maybe motor vehicle accident, serious intracranial bleeding, or even gunshot victims who are deemed brain dead. So you could harvest their organs without, of course, with legislation in place. Usually, we did it before, but we engaged the relatives and got consent from them to take their kidneys. And that was good. Some people would comply, some people wouldn't. But in our situation at this moment, it's even possible now to get more kidneys and more organs.
What is wrong, Dr. Bhoorasingh? And I'm going to pin you down on this. What is wrong with incentivizing it? Tell me.
In terms of what?
Well, I will certainly not countenance what happens in India, I'm told, for example, and even some parts of Latin America, where organs are monetized, commoditized. So, you can go purchase a kidney from somebody who will sign a paper and say, I'm willing to give my kidney to John Brown.
Oh yes,
because he has quietly got a $50,000 in his pocket. I'm not going there. But what would be wrong? What would be wrong with saying to somebody, sign this agreement, and in case you are declared brain dead as a result of a motor vehicle accident, your organs can be harvested and your family will benefit to the tune of X dollars, which they perhaps need to help bury you and to send the children to school. So I can't take the kidney from you, but if you are brain dead, rather than that kidney and that lung and that heart and that pancreas being put in under the earth for the worms to devour it, the official medical personnel would be authorized to take these organs to save the lives of other people. What is wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with it, and I think in some countries, I think South Africa is one where it's an opt-out situation where the legislation exists that unless you write specifically that if I'm brain dead, I do not want my organ donated.
Yes.
Well,
I've heard of that.
Write that.
Yes.
If you don't write that, then the government has a right to take the organs.
Uh-huh. That exists in South Africa?
I think in South Africa that is one area I remember.
What sort of impact has that made on the availability of organs to save people's lives? Do you know?
No, I haven't looked into that, but there are some countries, that is a real possibility, and patients even right now say, you can have my organ if I'm in a situation like that. So that's a real, but there are other, there's an alternative, like for kidney, for example, you can give a kidney and still remain alive. So individuals can say, I want to, well, they do it because we do it in Jamaica. We donate what we call live related. If you have a relative, they will volunteer to give the relative a kidney, and both remain alive. So I know that persons who can sell will consent to sell one kidney to a person. And I've seen patients or individuals approach me when I was in donation that they come with somebody and say, I am willing to sell this person my kidney.
Oh.
We never really got to that level because it was always viewed with some suspicion.
Yes.
Because later on they might come back and say, we need some more money or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Bhoorasingh, can you just hold me, just take a break? We'll come right back to the discussion.
Yes, okay.
Welcome back. It's Jamaica Live. We're on Bridge 99. We're winding down now. Another 11 or so minutes to go. We're talking with Dr. Bhoorasingh, we've been talking about kidney transplant. Dr. Patrick Bhoorasingh, talking about organ donation, broadly speaking. Dr. Bhoorasingh,
Yes, sir.
let me put a situation to you. Let us say we were to have the appropriate legislative framework in place. Let us say we were to have a kind of cultural transformation. And let us say we were at a point where somebody is injured in a car accident. That person is rushed to the hospital, or that person suffers a gunshot wound. That person succumbs. And what you're looking at, the person doesn't have any hepatitis B, doesn't have any HIV. You have some live, person is brain dead, but not organ dead. You have some live, valuable organs there. Let us say that at that hospital, which could be Lincoln Hospital, it could be Spanish Town, it could be Maypen. But you're looking at a possibility where you could have a pair of kidneys, a pair of lungs, you could have a heart, you could have a pancreas, you could have intestines, you could have bone, you could have all kind of tissues that are valuable. But the window of that valuability, for want of a better way of putting it, is very short. You're talking about a matter of hours. Would we have, and if we don't have, would we be able to put in place the facilities, the logistical management to harvest those organs and tissues, to do it in the kind of careful way that it would have to be done, to store it for the short time that it can be kept, to transport it, and when you transport it, to get it to a point where, you know, they are ready to receive you and receive the organs and to transplant. Do we have that capability, or and how difficult would it be to put that capability in place?
Yes, I will speak to you from experience that we had that mechanism in place. Now we have lost it because of funding and so on. Because I remember doing transplants at KPH. Me, myself, and my team put in a kidney, and the kidney came from, like, a child got hit with a motor vehicle, a fatal motor vehicle accident. I remember one night the kidney was brought from Bustamante Hospital, and I can tell you, there was a football match going on there, USA, Jamaica. So the traffic on Orthopedic Drive was terrible. And we used the ambulance to transport the kidney to KPH, and it was done successfully. We had the mechanism, because to put the mechanism in place, you need a dedicated team. Yeah, that include anesthetist. You can keep the brain dead person alive with support, but not permanently, but up to the time of harvesting the organ. You can keep them alive. You have to have available operating theater. Sometimes for the kidney, for example, you need 3 theaters to be in place, because the cadaver, the person who is brain dead, can give 2 kidneys, and you have 2 recipients. So it's 3 operating rooms running concurrently. We used to do it. We did it at wee hours of the morning, 11 o'clock at night, when the theaters are down. And we had all the teams come in, and one team do the harvesting, and we had 2 separate teams put the organ in the individuals. But you
need a lot of backup support in terms of the database to identify to do the cross batching, so that you know. There's no point in implanting a kidney in me. That kidney can, my body can't take that particular kidney, no?
Yeah, but I can tell you that it was in place, because when you have a dialysis unit, you have all the patients on dialysis.
And you would have that information.
Yes, we have all the antigenic information on them. And every time you transfuse them, you know, it will change. You have to redo the antigenic information. And you know, if a patient comes brain dead, you do the basic antigenic test, and you straight off narrow down who is going to get it from your information you have. And you call them in and say, you need to come in. And of course...
And come in quickly.
Yes, of course. And you have to dialyze them like before they go on to get the organ.
Yes.
And at the same time, you do the workup on the person who is brain dead. The basic things, their blood group, their HIV test, their hepatitis test, and the lab comes in as an emergency. And then you need not only the surgeons, but you need the nephrologist, the person who will, because it's not just putting in the organ and the patient can run like a duty, like a car part. You have, because even with the antigenic information matching to the greatest extent, there will be some element of rejection.
Which you have to fight.
Yes, of course. You have to get appropriate medications, and you have to get regular estimation of the level of the drug that you have on board in order to get the proper immunosuppression done. And with all that backup, you need personnel. So even to get the system back in place, in the past we had this system in place because we had surgeons, we call on the surgeons, but it became onerous because these surgeons have other responsibility and nephrologists. Like, I don't want to hear that I'm going to do, I just have to put in an organ in. Somebody calls me with appendicitis. You know? Yeah, because it's your responsibility also.
Yes.
So the individual...
You need some level of clear dedication,
yes, definitely.
Of speciality there.
Yeah. And we can get back there now. We can get back there. It is because there are people still around who have been involved in this process.
How advanced is the transplantation as a science? I mean, when Lawson Douglas did the first one in 1971, that's 50 years ago, you know?
Yes.
In those 50 years, how advanced has the medical science become in terms of the approach, the procedures, the kind of support equipment that is available?
Well, it's significantly advanced. I know when Lawson Douglas did it, the only antigenic information that he used was the blood group matching between the recipient and the donor. Subsequent to that, and even the drugs that he used to suppress the patient, they were just rudimentary. Now all that has changed, and we have gone beyond that. We have better drugs. We recognize that there are other antigens that need to come into place. Mm-hmm. And there are other things you can look at. Even with some kidney issues, they can do what we call on-the-table preparation of the kidney. Maybe a kidney might have an abnormality. They can do some on-the-table operation to make the kidney appropriate for transplant.
Yes.
So it is getting better. But I say, for us to do it, I think legislation is one. We can always plan for that. But do we have a team in place to do all that? It's possible. I know it's possible because...
What you're saying, it is doable, but we have to... There are things that we have to put in place.
Yes, definitely. Because when Lawson Douglas got it, when I joined him, and other persons I can mention, Professor McCartney, etc., we were doing one transplant per month.
Yes.
And we transplanted patients from Trinidad, Guyana, Antigua, I remember.
Yes.
And it was no issue.
Well, I'm glad. I'm optimistic based on what you're telling me.
I believe we can get back there. Yeah. It's not a big mountain to climb.
We're running out of time. I want to thank you very, very much, Dr. Bhoorasingh, for joining me. Thank you for
Yeah.
For winding up the discussion on such a hopeful note. Thank you so very much.
Yeah, you're welcome, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're at the end of the program. First program of the year. We're going to be back next week, Monday, to continue our discussion. We're a single issue discussion program, so we're going to determine what we take on next week. But thanks to my producers, thanks to my studio engineers, thanks to all of you who have been listening to us since we started back at the end of September. Look forward to seeing you next week, Monday. God bless you.